"Sir, we don't want to embarrass you. The menu prices might be overwhelming." The hostess at Le Mirage Royale didn't hide her disgust. Malik, 72, stood motionless in his faded brown coat in Dubai's most expensive restaurant. Cracked shoes, uncombed hair, worn clothing. It was supposed to be a quiet visit before a multi-million-dollar decision. "I'll sit wherever is available," he said softly. She didn't check the system. Her eyes had already judged. "Try the cafe down the street." She signaled security. What she didn't notice was Malik's absolute calm, not humiliation, but the serenity of someone who'd faced worse and conquered it. Then, across the dining room, a man in a tailored suit froze. His tablet clattered to the floor. "That can't be," Samuel whispered, hands trembling. The restaurant had no idea. The beggar they were removing owned half the ships feeding this golden city. Welcome to Nature's Shot Tales, where every story reveals the power of character over circumstance. If this is your first time here, hit that subscribe button and join our community of truth seekers. We'd love to know. Drop a comment telling us where you're watching from today. Now, let's dive into today's remarkable story. Dubai didn't just shine, it screamed wealth. Every surface in the Marina district reflected light. Glass towers that clawed at the sky, chrome elevators visible through transparent walls, fountains that danced to classical music. Even the air felt expensive, filtered and perfumed, carrying the scent of imported flowers and ambition. Le Mirage Royale sat at the pinnacle of this excess. The restaurant occupied the 47th floor of the Celestine Tower. Its entrance featured white marble veined with gold, doors made of etched crystal, and a chandelier constructed from 10,000 hand-blown glass pieces. Women arrived in gowns that cost more than cars. Men wore watches that could feed villages. Into this temple of opulence walked Malik. His brown coat had seen better decades. The fabric, once quality wool, now showed threads at the cuffs and collar. His shoes, leather, well made originally, bore cracks across the toes like dried riverbeds. His shirt collar was frayed. His pants carried the slight shine of fabric worn too many times. But it was his face that told the real story. Weathered, lined, patient, the face of a man who had survived things these diners would never comprehend. The contrast was deliberate. Malik had chosen these clothes carefully that morning, pulling them from the back of his closet in his penthouse suite 3 kilometers away. He'd left his tailored suits hanging, left his Italian shoes in their boxes, left his Patek Philippe watch in its case. He wanted to see something, and now he was seeing it. The hostess, a young woman named Gabrielle, according to her name tag, smiled when he approached. It was the professional smile of luxury service, trained and precise. It died the moment she looked at his shoes. "Good evening, sir." Her tone shifted. Still polite, but cooler. "Do you have a reservation?" "No," Malik replied softly. His accent carried the rounded vowels of East Africa. "But I was hoping." "I'm terribly sorry." She didn't check her computer, didn't glance at the seating chart displayed on her tablet. "We're fully booked this evening." Behind her, Malik could see at least 6 empty tables. He nodded slowly. "I see. What about the bar area?" Gabrielle's smile tightened. She leaned forward slightly, lowering her voice to what she probably thought was a kind tone. "Sir, I'm trying to help you. This restaurant, the prices can be quite overwhelming. The average entrée is $450. Before wine." She paused meaningfully. "There's a wonderful cafe 2 blocks down. Very affordable. Very welcoming." A man at a nearby table chuckled into his whiskey. His companion, a woman dripping in diamonds, whispered something behind her hand. Both glanced at Malik, then away, smirking. Another couple openly stared, the wife's expression a mixture of confusion and mild alarm, as if Malik might ask them for spare change. Malik felt none of what they expected. No shame burning in his chest. No anger rising in his throat. No desperate need to explain or defend. Instead, he felt something closer to anthropological curiosity. This reaction, this immediate visceral rejection based on appearance, it was so predictable, so perfectly executed. He could have scripted it. "I understand," he said gently. "Thank you for your honesty." He didn't leave. He walked slowly to a bench near the entrance, designed for guests waiting for their parties to arrive, and sat down. Gabrielle blinked, clearly uncertain. The script in her head didn't include this. Rejected people were supposed to leave, embarrassed and defeated. A waiter approached her, speaking quietly. She nodded toward Malik. The waiter's expression hardened. But Malik wasn't watching them anymore. He was remembering. 23 years ago, the Indian Ocean had been both beautiful and merciless. Malik had been 49 then, working as a deckhand on the Tessa Marie, a cargo ship that hauled textiles and machinery between Mombasa and Mumbai. The work was brutal. 12-hour shifts, scalding sun, equipment that failed regularly and violently. The pay barely covered his family's rent back home. He'd been nothing. Invisible. The kind of man people stepped around without seeing. The ship's kitchen was even worse than the deck. A metal box that became an oven in tropical heat, staffed by one overworked cook who somehow produced 3 meals a day for 40 men. That cook was Samuel, 22 years old. Thin as rope. Eyes that burned with something bigger than his circumstances. One evening, after a particularly grueling shift, Malik had collapsed on his bunk, too exhausted to walk to the mess hall. Samuel had appeared with a plate of rice, fish, and vegetables. "You missed dinner," the young man had said simply. Malik had been too tired to question it. He'd eaten gratefully. It happened again the next week. And the week after. They'd started talking during those quiet moments. Careful conversations between men who both understood what it meant to be overlooked. "Someday," Samuel had said once, his voice fierce despite his youth, "I'll own a restaurant. A real one. Where people respect the food. Respect the craft." Malik had smiled, taking another bite. "Someday I'll own ships. Never work for anyone again." They'd both laughed at their impossible dreams. Life had seemed determined to prove them fools. Malik returned to the present. The restaurant hummed with conversation and clinking crystal. Piano music drifted from hidden speakers. Waiters moved like choreographed dancers. And in the center of it all, at a corner table with a view of the glowing city, sat a man in a perfectly tailored black suit. He was reviewing something on his tablet. His posture relaxed but focused. Professional. Successful. The man looked up, perhaps sensing the disturbance at the entrance. His eyes landed on Malik. And everything in his body went absolutely still. The tablet slipped slightly in his hands. His lips parted. And in that frozen moment, recognition sparked like a match struck in darkness. Samuel Okoro had trained himself not to be distracted. At 38, he'd built a career on focus. On seeing what others missed. On maintaining control in environments designed to overwhelm. Tonight was supposed to be routine. A quiet Wednesday evening reviewing quarterly projections while maintaining visible presence. Good for morale. Good for business. The tablet in his hands displayed Le Mirage Royale's financial performance. Revenue up 18%. Customer satisfaction ratings at 94%. 3 waiting lists for reservations extending into next month. Numbers he'd dreamed about 20 years ago when his hands had smelled perpetually of onions and cooking oil. He scrolled through vendor contracts, barely aware of the piano music or the murmured conversations surrounding him. His espresso sat cooling beside an untouched dessert, chocolate soufflé that his pastry chef insisted he try. The disturbance at the entrance registered only as background noise. Gabrielle handling something. Normal. She was excellent at managing difficult situations. Samuel continued reading, making mental notes about the seafood supplier's increased pricing. But something nagged at him. A quality of silence that didn't belong. He'd learned on cargo ships that certain silences meant danger. The moment before equipment failed. The pause before a storm hit. The stillness preceding catastrophe. This felt similar. Samuel looked up. His eyes found the old man immediately. Seated on the waiting bench, utterly still, hands folded in his lap. Worn coat. Weathered face. Silver hair uncombed. The restaurant's opulence seemed to bend around him like light around a black hole. Present but irrelevant. Samuel's chest tightened. No. It couldn't be. He studied the man's posture. Straight-backed despite obvious age. Shoulders broad even under the shabby coat. Head held with quiet dignity that had nothing to do with pride and everything to do with unshakable self-knowledge. Samuel knew that posture. Had seen it on heaving decks during storms. Had watched it remain steady when everyone else panicked. His eyes moved to the man's face. The years had added lines, carved deeper channels around the mouth and eyes. But the bone structure remained unchanged. The set of the jaw. The particular way he held stillness. Not waiting but observing. Samuel's tablet slipped in his suddenly nerveless fingers. The old man's eyes shifted, met his across the crowded restaurant. And Samuel saw it. That same calm, patient intelligence that had once looked at a terrified 22-year-old cook and said, "Breathe, boy. You're alive. That's all that matters right now." "No," Samuel whispered. "It can't be." But his body was already moving. He stood so abruptly his chair scraped against marble, drawing glances from nearby tables. The tablet clattered onto the table beside his forgotten soufflé. Gabrielle was speaking urgently to Marco, their head waiter. Marco nodded, approaching the old man with the practiced efficiency of someone about to remove an unwanted presence. "Sir, if you could please." "Stop." Samuel's voice cut through the restaurant's ambient noise. Marco froze mid-sentence. Turning. "Mr. Okoro?" Samuel crossed the space between them, his Italian leather shoes silent on the marble. Other diners noticed now, their CEO moving with unusual urgency, face pale. He stopped 3 feet from the bench. Up close, the resemblance was undeniable. Age had changed details but not essence. This was the face that had appeared through black smoke and flames, shouting his name when everyone else had run. "Is it really you?" Samuel's voice cracked. "Captain Malik?" The old man's expression shifted. A smile, small, genuine, touched with something like relief, crossed his weathered features. "Hello, little cook." The voice. 20 years hadn't changed it. Deep, measured, carrying that particular accent Samuel had nearly forgotten but recognized instantly. His knees went weak. "My God," Samuel breathed. "It's really you." The fire had started in the engine room. Samuel could still smell it when he closed his eyes. Burning oil, melting plastic, metal heated beyond tolerance. He'd been in the galley preparing dinner when the alarm screamed. The ship's intercom had crackled. "All hands, engine fire, all hands." Then nothing. Just sirens and shouting. Protocol said evacuate to the upper deck. Wait for instructions. But Samuel had frozen. 22 years old, his 3rd month at sea, and terror had turned his legs to stone. Smoke began pouring through the ventilation system, thick and black, filling the galley like toxic fog. He dropped to the floor, remembering something about smoke rising, about air near the ground. The heat intensified. Metal groaned. Somewhere, someone screamed. Samuel had crawled toward the door, but the smoke disoriented him. Left became right. Forward became nowhere. His lungs burned. His vision blurred. He'd thought, with crystal clarity, "This is how I die. In a metal box in the middle of the ocean. 22 years old and nobody will remember my name." Then hands had grabbed his shoulders. Strong. Sure. A voice shouting, "Samuel, take my hand." Malik. The deckhand who barely spoke, who everyone overlooked, who worked twice as hard as anyone else for half the recognition. Malik had lifted Samuel like he weighed nothing, throwing him over one shoulder in a fireman's carry. Then he'd run, through smoke so thick Samuel couldn't see his own hands, through heat that blistered exposed skin, through corridors that groaned with structural failure. Samuel had coughed, choked, barely conscious. And Malik had run. Upstairs. Through hatches. Past flames that licked at walls. When they'd burst onto the upper deck, Samuel had collapsed, sucking in clean air like a drowning man breaching the surface. Malik had set him down gently, checked him for injuries, then disappeared back into the smoke. He'd pulled out 2 more men before the fire crew arrived. Samuel returned to the present. The elegant restaurant. The crystal chandelier. The old man in the shabby coat sitting on a bench like discarded furniture. "You disappeared," Samuel said quietly. "After the fire. They said you quit. Nobody knew where you went." Malik nodded. "I had things to build. For 20 years, I've wondered if you were alive. If you were well. If you ever thought about." "Every day," Malik interrupted gently. "I thought about you every day." Gabrielle hovered nearby, confusion written across her face. Marco stood frozen. Several diners had stopped eating, watching this strange scene unfold. Samuel turned slowly to face the restaurant. His restaurant. His staff. His carefully curated world of luxury and exclusivity. When he spoke, his voice carried across the sudden silence. "Do you know who you just tried to throw out?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Gabrielle's face drained of color. Marco took an involuntary step backward. At the nearest table, a woman in a Chanel dress set down her wine glass with a trembling hand. Nobody answered. Samuel's eyes swept across the restaurant, past the wealthy diners who'd smirked, the couples who'd whispered, the man who'd laughed into his whiskey. "This man," Samuel continued, his voice thick with emotion, "is the reason I'm alive today." He moved to stand beside Malik, one hand resting protectively on the old man's shoulder. 20 years ago, on a cargo ship in the Indian Ocean, there was a fire. Engine room. Black smoke. Flames everywhere. His throat tightened. I was trapped in the galley. Everyone ran to save themselves. The restaurant had gone absolutely silent. Even the piano music seemed to fade. Everyone except him. Samuel looked down at Malik. "This man carried me through fire and smoke. Saved 2 others. Then disappeared the next day like he'd never existed." Gabrielle's mouth opened. No sound emerged. A man at table 7 leaned toward his companion. "Is this real?" Samuel pulled out his phone with shaking hands. He opened a news browser, typed rapidly, then turned the screen toward the nearest diners. "This," he said quietly, "is who you just insulted." The couple leaned forward, squinting at the screen. The woman gasped. Samuel walked between tables, holding his phone out like evidence in a trial. African shipping magnate expands Dubai operations. Malik Adekunle, the billionaire who built an empire from nothing. Adekunle Maritime Group controls 40% of East African trade routes. Each table he passed erupted in whispers. $4 billion. That's him. The shipping tycoon. Oh my God, I laughed. I actually laughed. The man who'd chuckled into his whiskey had gone pale. His companion stared at her plate like it might offer escape. Gabrielle gripped the hostess stand, knuckles white. Samuel stopped in the center of the restaurant, turning slowly to address everyone. "This man doesn't need your expensive food or your validation. He owns private ports in 3 countries. He employs 14,000 people. He's dined with presidents and kings." His voice hardened. "And you judged him because his coat was old." The silence was suffocating now. A businessman in a $10,000 suit couldn't meet Samuel's eyes. A young couple who'd openly stared at Malik suddenly found their phones fascinating. Marco looked like he might be sick. Samuel returned to Malik, his anger softening into something closer to reverence. "Captain, please. The best table in the house. Whatever you want, it's yours. Everything." But Malik shook his head slowly. "I appreciate that, Samuel." His voice remained gentle, unchanged by the revelation. "But I didn't come here to eat." Samuel frowned. "Then why?" Malik reached into his worn coat. The movement was slow, deliberate. He withdrew a leather portfolio, the only thing on his person that looked expensive, though even it was worn with use. He placed it carefully on the hostess stand. Then unzipped it. Documents slid out. Official papers with legal letterhead. Contracts. Financial statements. Samuel's confusion deepened. "Captain, I don't understand." "The restaurant is being sold," Malik said quietly. "Did you know that?" The blood drained from Samuel's face. "What? No. That's impossible. Mr. Rousseau would have told me." "Mr. Rousseau made the decision 3 weeks ago. Quietly. Through private channels." Malik's fingers traced the edge of the documents. "He's been negotiating with a hotel conglomerate. They plan to convert this space into executive club." Samuel staggered slightly. "But this is... I've built this place. 5 years of..." "I know." Malik's eyes held infinite patience. "That's why I came." Understanding crashed over Samuel like a wave. "You're buying it," he whispered. Malik nodded once. "I wanted to see it first. See what kind of place you'd built. What kind of man you'd become." His gaze swept the restaurant. "And I wanted to see how that place treated people who couldn't offer anything in return." The implications settled over the room like ash. Every person who'd judged him. Every whisper. Every smirk. All of it had been a test. And they'd failed spectacularly. Gabrielle made a small, wounded sound. Samuel pulled out his phone again, hands shaking. "Mr. Rousseau. It's Samuel. I need you at the restaurant. Now." A pause. "I don't care if you're at the opera. Get here. Immediately." He ended the call, looking at Malik with something between hope and terror. "Captain, if you buy this restaurant..." "When?" Malik corrected gently. "When you buy it," Samuel amended. "What happens to everyone?" It was the question burning in every mind. The staff who'd tried to remove him. The guests who'd mocked him. The systems that had judged him worthless. Malik didn't answer. He simply returned to the bench and sat down, hands folded, posture unchanged. Waiting. Philippe Rousseau arrived in 40 minutes, still in his tuxedo from the opera, his wife's angry texts lighting up his phone. He brought lawyers. 2 of them, pulled from their own evening plans, carrying briefcases and wearing expressions of professional irritation that vanished the moment they saw Malik. Everyone knew his face now. Google searches had proliferated across the restaurant. Guests who tried to leave were turned back by morbid curiosity. The negotiation happened in Samuel's office. Malik. Rousseau. Lawyers. Documents spread across the desk. Samuel stood outside the closed door, listening to muffled voices. The restaurant below had descended into anxious silence. Staff huddled near the kitchen. Guests lingered over cold food. Gabrielle sat at the bar, head in her hands. Marco kept checking his phone, probably updating his resume. 30 minutes passed. Then the office door opened. Malik emerged first, his expression unreadable. Rousseau followed, looking shaken but resigned. The lawyers flanked them, carrying signed documents. Malik walked slowly to the restaurant's edge, overlooking the dining room. Everyone looked up. He held a single piece of paper, the deed of sale freshly notarized. "As of 8:47 this evening," he said quietly, "Le Mirage Royale belongs to Atacunnel Maritime Properties." Silence. Then one question, whispered from multiple mouths simultaneously. What now? Malik folded the document carefully. His eyes found Gabrielle, trembling at the bar. Found Marco, pale and terrified. Found every guest who'd judged him. And smiled. The staff assembled in the main dining room at 9:15. Waiters. Bartenders. Kitchen staff still in their aprons. Gabrielle stood at the front, her mascara smudged from crying. Marco beside her, jaw tight, already composing explanations he'd never get to deliver. The remaining guests had been politely dismissed, their meals comped, their discomfort palpable as they'd hurried toward the elevators. Now only employees remained, standing in neat rows like soldiers awaiting court-martial. Malik stood before them in his worn brown coat. Behind him, Samuel watched silently, his expression unreadable. The chandelier cast fractured light across the marble floor. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, Dubai glittered with oblivious beauty. Gabrielle's hands trembled. She'd spent the last 30 minutes mentally cataloging every word she'd said, every dismissive gesture, every assumption. The cafe recommendation. The comment about overwhelming prices. The way she'd looked at his shoes like they carried disease. She deserved to be fired. She knew it. Everyone knew it. Malik cleared his throat softly. I want to tell you something about my life, he began, his voice carrying easily in the silent room. 50 years ago I was nothing. A boy in Mombasa with no education, no connections, no future anyone could see. He paused, his weathered hands clasped in front of him. I worked on fishing boats. 12 years old, hands bleeding from nets, eating one meal a day if I was lucky. The boat owners treated us like equipment. Replaceable. Worthless. A young waiter shifted uncomfortably. When I was 19, I got work on cargo ships. Better pay, harder conditions. And everywhere I went, people looked at me the way you looked at me tonight. Gabrielle flinched. Like I was less than human. Like my poverty was a personal failing. Like I didn't deserve basic dignity because my clothes were wrong or my accent was wrong or my skin was wrong. The silence pressed down like physical weight. I remember every single person who showed me kindness during those years. Malik's voice softened. The cook who gave me extra food. The first mate who taught me to read shipping manifests. The port manager who recommended me for a better position. His eyes swept across the assembled staff. And I remember every person who treated me like garbage. The restaurant owners who chased me away. The hotel staff who assumed I was there to steal. The people who laughed. Marco's face had gone gray. Do you know what separates those two groups? Malik asked. Nobody answered. Not intelligence. Not education. Not wealth. He paused. Character. Simple human character. The choice to see people as people, regardless of what they can give you in return. He turned to Gabrielle. She couldn't breathe. You treated me with contempt tonight, Malik said quietly. You made assumptions. You were cruel disguised as helpful. Tears spilled down her cheeks. I'm so sorry. I'm so. Malik raised a hand gently. I'm making you restaurant manager. The words hung in the air like impossible objects. Gabrielle's mouth opened. What? Effective immediately. 20% salary increase. Full operational authority under Samuel's oversight. But I don't understand. I treated you exactly how you were trained, Malik finished. This restaurant's culture taught you that appearance equals worth. That wealth deserves respect and poverty deserves removal. That's not your failing. That's the system's failing. He stepped closer to her. I don't want you fired. I want you educated. I want you to learn what I learned, that the person in worn shoes might be the person who changes your life. That kindness costs nothing. That dignity isn't earned by money. Gabrielle covered her face with her hands. shoulders shaking. "Can you learn that?" Malik asked gently. She nodded, unable to speak. Malik turned to address everyone. "This restaurant will change. We'll still serve excellent food, still maintain high standards, but we'll also remember that those standards apply to how we treat people, not just how we plate food." He looked at Marco. "You're head of staff training now. Develop a program. Teach what matters." Marco blinked. "Sir, I tried to remove you. And now you'll teach others why that was wrong. Use your shame productively." The tension in the room shifted, transforming from fear into something more complex. Relief mixed with responsibility, shame mixed with unexpected grace. Malik had given them what they didn't deserve: a second chance. 2 hours later, after the staff had dispersed into the Dubai night, Samuel found Malik in the upstairs office. The old man sat in the leather chair, looking out at the glowing city. He'd finally removed his worn coat, revealing a simple but clean shirt beneath. Samuel carried a tea tray, Kenyan blend, prepared the way he remembered from the ship. "You used to drink this after night shifts," Samuel said quietly, pouring 2 cups. Malik smiled. "You remember." "I remember everything about those months." Samuel sat across from him. "They saved my life in more ways than one." Steam rose from the cups between them. "You came back for me," Samuel said. "Tonight. You could have bought this restaurant through lawyers, never set foot inside. But you came personally." Malik sipped his tea thoughtfully. "I wanted to see if the world had gotten kinder, if people had learned to look past surfaces." "And?" Samuel asked. "What did you find?" Malik was quiet for a long moment. "I found that most people still judge quickly, still choose comfort over compassion." He set down his cup. "But I also found you. The boy I saved became a man who builds beautiful things, who leads with integrity, who recognized me when I was invisible to everyone else." Samuel's eyes burned. "That," Malik continued softly, "is what gives me hope. Not that everyone is kind, but that kindness, when planted, grows into something remarkable." They sat in comfortable silence, 2 men separated by age and wealth but connected by something deeper. "What happens now?" Samuel finally asked. Malik smiled. "Now, you run this restaurant. Teach these people. Build the kind of place where someone like I was 50 years ago could walk in and be treated like a human being." He stood slowly, old joints protesting. "Because true wealth isn't in bank accounts or shipping empires, Samuel. It's in the lives you touch, the kindness you plant, the dignity you give freely." He placed a hand on Samuel's shoulder. "That's the only currency that matters." And just like that, a ragged-looking old man in a faded coat reminded a room full of sophisticated people that judgment reveals more about the judge than the judged. That revenge is easy, but mercy is powerful. That true wealth isn't measured in what you can buy, but in what you choose to give when you own nothing at all. Thank you for watching until the end. If this story touched your heart, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Your support helps us bring more inspiring stories to life. Tell us in the comments, what lesson will you carry forward? See you next time.